tap end. Here we are again. I've lost count of the number of episodes that we've done now, so it's just a welcome to At the Tap End. At the tap end today is not this little fella. It is a far more interesting individual than the person that washes my body. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Mr. Matt Davies. How are you, Matt?
Very well indeed, sir. How are you? And how's the water?
Yeah, so in fact, let's start with the water, because today it's absolutely scorching, and normally I've got to like put cold water in and suck up. I like a hot bath, but today I've gone like lukewarm water just because it's kind of like really warm outside. So it's lovely actually,
Good. I'm glad to hear it's beautiful here as well. I think we're squeezing out the last few days of summer before autumn descends upon us.
We are indeed. So, Matthew Davies, I always get confused myself. Who are you, and how have you got to sit at the tap end today, Matt?
Well, that's the question we're all asking ourselves. I am a leadership consultant, exec coach, and speaker, based in a little village called Balerno, just outside of Edinburgh. I have worked for in a large financial services institution for 15 years, and just this week is actually my last week of employment. I'm out on my own. And, I was looking for good and interesting people to connect with that do fun things and, kind of run their own businesses and all this sort of stuff. And this handsome gentleman appeared on my timeline. I thought, I'll show Mr. Houghton some love. And, we bonded over our shared interest in Chorley because I've coached American football down there in the past. So, that's how I ended up here.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We have indeed. In fact, actually, just between you and I, you're on the podcast as well, aren't you? And the podcast episode with you is out this coming Monday, so it's the next one. So that's something else to look forward to. But whilst I've got you, whilst I'm washing myself, I thought, what better topic to talk to you about than leadership? Because I wrote a post on LinkedIn, I think it was last week, where I said about Ronaldo going back to Old Trafford and it being credited with Alex Ferguson being credited with one of the things for the reasons for that, and then returning to an old boss and stuff. And then in the post and in the comments that I asked people to say, is there a boss that they would return to? And more people said that there were bosses that they wouldn't return to than that they would return to. So I've started digging a little bit deeper, and I went on our friend Google, and there was a study done in America, and 1 million people who voluntarily left the jobs in America, 75% of them said that they did it because of a bad boss. So, Matthew Davies, leadership exec coach, what's the difference between a bad boss and a great boss?
It's in the eye of the beholder to an extent. I think what you might look for in a boss and what I might look for in a boss are not the same thing. And that's what kind of brings us back to the value of situational leadership, recognizing the situation you're in, recognizing the needs of the individuals that you lead, the needs of the situation that you're leading them through, the broader organizational context and all that good stuff, and making sure that the way you lead them is appropriate for them. Now, that comes to the interesting question of the kind of support challenge matrix. That your sponge reminds me of Ed the Duck. I was actually trying to explain to my daughter last night about Ed the Duck and Gordon the Gopher, because she, obviously those characters are long retired, but it's a beautiful thing. I think it's maybe a chicken, though, is it?
I think it is meant to be a chicken, yeah. What you could do is you could show her the video of you chatting to somebody in the bath, and this is what you do for work.
Even at 6 years old, Harper Alice Davies would know that that's not the strangest thing her dad's been involved in. Her time out. So, but to the point, I think the difference between a great leader and a bad leader, in my mind, is somebody who actually cares. Who cares about being a great leader, who works on it, who seeks feedback from their peers, from the people that they lead, and genuine, authentic feedback. We've all seen those sort of corporate feedback mechanisms whereby you're my boss and I know fine well that if I don't say nice things about you, it's going to lead to grief down the line. So I'll just say whatever it takes for an easy life, But yeah, it's I think situational leadership, I think understanding the people, I think showing them that you care is all a good place to start.
Yeah, no, I love that. Do you believe there are so many bad leaders, or not? Do leaders get a bad rep in your mind? And are there so many bad ones? Because I mean, and let me add a little bit more context, because historically, and when I first started working, people used to get promoted based on the highest widgets produced. But I have seen a shift in that, and now it's a bit more competence based and stuff like that. So is that one of the reasons still? What's your take on it?
I think that's a big problem still in a lot of places, whereby, we're a group of, say, salespeople. You sell the most widgets, and so they make you the leader of the team, even though the skills required to sell widgets and the skills required to lead people are not necessarily the same. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to be good at it, but it also doesn't mean you are going to be good at it. And I think there are a lot of people who are reluctant leaders. You're at the top of your pay scale. We can't pay you anymore, so we're going to have to promote you to a leadership position that you neither want nor are capable of doing, nor are invested in doing well. So I think that leads to a lot of challenges. Are there a lot of bad leaders out there? I mean, I've certainly seen a few in my time. There's no doubt about that. But I think one of the other challenges is, do organizations truly value great leadership? And that's a question I've asked myself a lot over the past few years. I think we value things that we can measure, and if I have you, for example, but in this scenario now, I'm the boss and you're, reporting into me. If I develop you and grow you and you move on to bigger and better things, how is that recognized as a skill of mine? How is that rewarded? How is that encouraged? Actually, what would be better is Lee's really good at what he does, so keep him in his box, and you can keep that productivity high, keep the output high. That's what I've seen happen in a lot of places. Is we almost we keep our people on a leash, and we don't develop and promote and grow and move them on, because it's that's not what we're rewarded for. And ultimately, like anything else, you get what you reward people for in big organizations, and that is a challenge.
Yeah. So what is the answer, Matt?
I think organizations have to value great leadership. They talk about it, but do they truly value great leadership? I'll give you an example. There's a leader I worked with for quite a number of years. Actually, she was one of the first people I met when I joined the bank that I worked at 15 years ago, and she was somebody that I ended up coaching right up until my very last day. And she was just a phenomenal leader, just somebody that had a real care for her people, got the very best out of them. And that doesn't mean that she was soft on them. It's about finding the balance on that support challenge matrix. It's like high support, high challenge, making sure you get the best out of people. And the way they spoke about her, the way they responded to her, the effort that you got, the discretionary effort was huge, all down to the fact that she really cared about it and she made that her business. I think we have to find more people like that, and we have to put them in leadership positions. You can learn the technical competencies of any role, but do you have the aptitude and the interest and the willingness to be a great leader when you do it? And that's the people we should be looking for and get them in leadership positions. It's like, so I coach American football, as you know. One of the things we talk about in American football all the time as coaches is put your players in a position to be successful. If you've got a really small offensive line playing against a really massive defensive line, don't expect them to block people one-on-one, because it's just not going to happen. You're not going to set them up for success. So again, with leadership, it's find people that are good at this stuff and put them in a position to be successful and reap the rewards right through your organization.
Yeah, completely. I also think there's an element of the individual themselves being, so people that are in leadership positions now having a degree of, I guess, self-awareness to recognize where they can improve, and what has got them to that position might not be what will get them to be successful in that position.
What got you here?
So how do? Yes, yes, exactly what you've just said is a far more eloquent way of putting it. And how do you open, as a coach, as a leadership coach and exec coach, how do you open somebody's eyes to actually that they might be part of the problem, or that there's an opportunity for them to get better?
I sit down with them and I say, Lee, here's a question for you. If your team had a reunion in 10 years' time, and you were heading to that reunion, and then your car broke down on the way and you weren't able to make it, how would they talk about you as a leader when you weren't there? And how would you like them to talk about you? What would you like that experience to be? So you're firstly looking for that gap between how I would like to be perceived and how I think I'm perceived.
Yeah.
Then you say, would it be valuable if we spent some time discovering how you're actually perceived? Well, then you'll get an interesting response to your question, because then you start to see whether they care, firstly, and secondly, whether they're potentially almost hiding something from themselves. They say that they would be fondly remembered, but actually they're not keen to dig into it. They're not keen to put that to the test. And that's something that you can probe and ask questions at. But, almost doing that, not necessarily a 360, because it's not about, out and up. It's really just about down the way, but going out to those people and having a conversation with them and in a safe environment, one-on-one, and getting feedback on what does the person do, what do they do well? Kind of, you could do a stop, start, continue. You could do any of those types of things, and then bring it back to them in a safe environment, one-on-one as a coach. So rather than me putting you in front of your team and them, potentially roasting you for half an hour if it's not good stuff, or potentially puffing you up if they feel that's what they need to do for half an hour. It's about, I gather that information and I bring it back to you anonymously, and then we sit down and we say, how does this image of you that's been delivered by your team, how does it sit with the image that you want to have of yourself, and take it from there.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Right. So another question then for you, whilst we're chatting, is, so you've been an internal exec coach for quite a while, leadership coach for quite a while. My impression of that would be that you would be given leaders and some would want you there and some would not want you there. And then when you're an external, typically you're working with leaders who want you. So you've got a far bigger challenge as an internal exec coach or leadership coach than an external one. When you get somebody that doesn't want coaching, doesn't want to get better, what is it that you do? What do you still flog that horse because that's your job to do? What do you do?
It's a good question. There's a few things. First things first, the end of the line will potentially come, and I'll say, do you know what, Lee? There's no real appetite for this here from your end, and I value my time, and I've got a lot of leaders out there that are really keen for our services. So I think it's best we park this. I'll go and take my my skills and experience elsewhere and put them somewhere where they'll make a difference in the organisation. If in the future your opinion changes, your desire to be coached changes, then you know what I am, and we can look at picking it up at that point. But I think there's a certain element of value in yourself. Just going in and subordinate yourself to that individual and wasting your time and theirs isn't a good thing. But before you get to that point, there's always the conversation about understanding exactly what it is that is the barrier there. Because I've experienced it with I've coached hundreds of leaders over the last 8 years of doing the job, and you've gone from people who are extremely high performing leaders, and they're standing at the door waiting for you because they're excited to see what they can learn from you. They're excited to develop and to grow, versus other ones that have an opinion that coaching is a remedial thing. It's like, well, what have I done wrong to suddenly need coached? This idea that you only get coached if you've done something wrong, or if you're bad, or if you've misbehaved in some way. All the way through people who are just, they'll pay lip service to it, and they'll kind of, that whole wink management thing, but they're not really interested. But I try and, build rapport first of all. We spoke about that when we chatted the podcast. I seek to build a relationship with them first of all, to meet them on their level, to understand their experience. Sometimes people have had a bad experience with coaches. That's the other thing. They've spent time with somebody that's just no added value, so they're reluctant on that basis. So you look to understand what their background is, what their experience is, and what they would like to get out of it. And sometimes you can be as bold as saying, look, I know you didn't ask for me as coach. You didn't ask for anybody as a coach, but I'm here now. It's a resource that the organisation has paid for and put in front of you, which if you were to seek it externally yourself would cost you, potentially £500 an hour or more. So why don't we see if we can make the best of it and see if there's something valuable you can take away from it,
Yeah, no, completely. In one of your earlier answers, you said that great leadership is in the eyes of the person that is seeing that leader. I beholder, I think you said. And if it is different for everybody, how can a leader be better if everybody's view of good leadership differs?
Because you lead the individual. On the whole, there are some aspects of leadership that are team-wide or department-wide or business-wide, where you're setting a vision or a strategy, or setting expectations, or talking about perhaps the behaviors that you expect to see and holding people accountable for that. But a lot of what you do is dealing with the individuals one-on-one. Especially if you're leading a small team, or you're not at the very top of the organization. Once you get to the very top of the organization, the leadership that I've seen in those situations is quite different. It's not, because typically you're dealing with people who are very experienced themselves. When you're dealing with people who are maybe in their first roles, or you're leading line managers who are in their first line management role, it's a different environment, and you really need to to take the time to understand them and understand their needs and do what you can to support them. And ultimately, you want to bring the best out of them, because even if you're the most selfish leader on the planet, the better they do, the better you look, so you want to support them, you want to be there for them, you want to grow them, make them better. And so I think taking time to understand them and to tailor your approach to their needs is crucial.
Yeah, completely. It's all about the individual. I completely agree. I love this. I could chat to you all day. Unfortunately, though, the bathwater does get cold at a certain point in time, and my fingers do get a little bit wrinkly. But before that naturally happens, you've just taken a step from a permanent employer to working for yourself. So, who is it that you help?
It's a great question. So, I'm looking to help organizations for a start, organizations from the size of the one I've come from, which had 60 odd thousand employees, all the way down to, the organizations with 20, 30, 40, 50 people, to think about how they lead, to think about how they structure their leadership, how they develop their leaders, how they get the best from their people. Equally, individuals, people who are in organizations but who might be looking to develop and grow their own career and push on and learn a little bit more about themselves. The support I provide doesn't need to be within the context of the organization. It could be a relationship, exclusively between me and that individual. And then anybody who's looking for someone to host events for them and do MCing and speaking gigs and talk about leadership, talk about culture, talk about where leadership has been, where it's going, all that kind of stuff. That's my jam. That's what I like to do.
Yeah, no, love it. And if you could offer one piece of advice to leaders apart from ring Matthew Davies, what would that one piece of advice be to leaders?
My advice to any leader would be treat the leadership aspect of your role the same way you treat anything else that you want to get good at. Don't treat it like an afterthought. It's not like I'm going to be, a phenomenal salesperson and I just so happen to lead as well, or I'm going to be a world-class recruiter and I just so happen to lead as well. Treat the leadership aspect as seriously as you treat any other aspect of your job, and then just watch what happens. Watch the results you get, and you'll be blown away.
Yeah, love that. Thank you so much for joining me in the bath today. If people want to know more about you, Matthew, where would they go? What would they do? What would they find?
Well, the best place is LinkedIn at the moment. I've not got the website set up, but still, I don't know. I'm in two minds. I've spoken to various people who are like, I've had a website for 5 years and it's never generated me any business, versus other people who are like, yeah, you need to get a website set up. So I'm still in two minds as to that, and it will probably come in the future. But right now, they can add me. It's Matthew Davies. I go with my full Sunday title on LinkedIn. I should really change that, actually. It's linkedin.com/ML Davies. And I would love to hear from anybody, not just people who are looking to throw huge amounts of money in my direction for my skills and capabilities, but just people who are interested in leadership, people who talk about this stuff, think about this stuff, anyone that thinks I can add some value to them.
Yeah, amazing. It's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you over the last few weeks. So thank you very much again for joining me at the tap-in today.
My pleasure.
Good luck with everything that you've got going on, and I look forward to chatting to you again soon.
Thank you very much, and you too.